Well, Jim, that is an assessment that U.S. officials say will likely take days, if not weeks. But just now we are receiving word of a reaction of the U.S. take, anyway, on a meeting after the speeches. You heard both President Bush and President Jacques Chirac of France this morning giving very competing views of their view of the situation in Iraq and the role of the United Nations in the world. Mr. Bush and Mr. Chirac, who have had strained relations, of course, because of the Iraq debate, had a bilateral meeting, and U.S. officials telling reporters after that meeting that Mr. Chirac said he, quote, would not stand in the way of a new resolution put forward by the United States if there could not be a consensus. U.S. officials taking that to mean that France would not veto a new resolution in the Security Council. The biggest disagreement between these two leaders is a timetable for the political transition in Iraq. Mr. Chirac wants some authority turned over immediately to the Iraqi Governing Council. Mr. Bush says no, the United States needs to stay in charge for now until that Governing Council can write a constitution, schedule free and fair elections. And we are told that Mr. Bush told President Chirac it was, quote, not in the cards for there to be any immediate turnover of political authority, again, and that he would pursue a, quote, orderly transition in a new resolution before the Security Council. So from the U.S. perspective, that is good news out of that meeting in the sense that, yes, there are still disagreements, and U.S. officials say they will keep working at the language, but that President Chirac, according to a senior U.S. official, said he would not stand in the way of a new resolution. Mr. Bush highlighted this disagreement earlier today in his speech to the General Assembly. He said the United States was right to go to war in Iraq. He said the United States was doing everything it could now to get about the business of a transition to a new democracy inside Iraq, but the president also stressed that was going to take some time.
Secretary General, the primary goal of our coalition in Iraq is self-government for the people of Iraq, reached by orderly and democratic process. This process must unfold according to the needs of Iraqis, neither hurried nor delayed by the wishes of other parties.
Now, in addition to that Chirac meeting, Mr. Bush also met after his speech with the Prime Minister of Spain, Jose Maria Aznar, a leader who was an ally of the president in the debate and the United Nations debate leading up to the war. So those one-on-one meetings, Jim, now the most critical part of the president's stay here in New York. The White House had hoped for an agreement on a new resolution this week. They now concede that will not happen and that it could take weeks and weeks more to get that. But Mr. Bush sitting down with Prime Minister Aznar and, more importantly, from a negotiating standpoint, President Chirac of France. And again, the U.S. at least encouraged to hear word, according to this senior U.S. official, that France would not stand in the way if there was a vote in the Security Council on a resolution that France did not agree with. Jim?
On the streets of New York outside the UN headquarters there, John King, our senior White House correspondent. Thanks, John.
Well, CNN USA Today and Gallup conducted a telephone poll Monday of 1,003 adult Americans. Now, the poll shows that Mr. Bush's approval ratings have dropped to the lowest level of his presidency. The poll shows that 50% approve of how Bush is handling his job as president, 47% disapproved. 50% said it was worthwhile going to war in Iraq, 48% said it was not worthwhile. The poll had a sampling plus or minus 3 points. Well, on the ground in Baghdad, Iraq's Governing Council is considering temporarily shutting down the offices of two popular Arab language networks.
Yesterday, the Governing Council issued a resolution or a decree to close Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya satellite stations for violations and promoting sectarian differences in Iraq, promoting political violence, promoting killing of members of the Governing Council, promoting killing of members of the U.S. coalition, putting on their screens videotapes of terrorists terrorizing Iraqis and trying to intimidate the Iraqi people and the coalition and the Governing Council.
Well, there is no indication the Council or the Coalition's Provisional Authority has reached a final decision. Al Jazeera in Baghdad says the Council is preventing the network from covering official business for 2 weeks. But the network says the message was passed along verbally and it will continue to work until it receives an official order in writing. For several weeks, Council members have accused Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya of inflammatory reporting and inciting hatred. Last week, Al Arabiya aired a statement which it said was released by deposed Iraqi President Saddam Hussein.
Oh, Iraqis, oh, fighters, men and women, you must tighten the noose around the Americans and increase your attacks against them. You must conduct jihad by all means possible, financial and otherwise.
Well, the Council's announcement comes just days after an assassination attempt on Aqila al-Hashimi, one of 3 female members of the Governing Council. The Baghdad bureau chief for Al Arabiya joined with Al Jazeera in saying the network had not been informed of anything by the Governing Council and work continues in Baghdad as usual. Well, joining us now to talk more about the ramifications of a shutdown of Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya in Baghdad is Baria Alamuddin. She's the foreign editor for the London-based Arabic language newspaper Al Hayat. So where does this leave a free press?
Well, you see, there is this great debate. If I may first say that Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera have been informed and the work of their correspondents have been suspended for 2 weeks, and basically they are not allowed to cover the work of the council and not to enter ministries. But otherwise, they are still there and they still cover all other events. Well, as I just started to say, there is this great debate. Where is the press freedom and where does leave this freedom that we've been talking about, and indeed the Governing Council people have been talking about? And some people are saying, do we have a new Sahaf? Do we have a new regime whereby the freedom of the press is curtailed? I think there must be a very happy media there, and in the sense that, yes, you do need a free press, you do need to report what is happening on the ground, you need to report events. But of course there's a difference between reporting and inciting, and I think maybe all media outlets should look and see where they draw the line there.
With it being a US appointed Governing Council actually saying this, where does that leave? How is that interpreted in the Arab world?
Well, of course, it doesn't give it great credibility. If this council was elected democratically, if it was elected by the people, it would have been looked at it in a different way. People would have looked at it in a different way. But you see, these people most of them have lived abroad, most of them are well-educated people, so one would expect for them to leave a leeway, to leave freedom for the press. But don't forget, there is this problem between stations like Al Jazeera and in a way now Al Arabiya, and between the American administration at large, because we've heard many members of the American administration criticize these 2 stations specifically. Hence, maybe the credibility of the council here is questioned by many Arabs, meaning, are these being the voice of the American administration? But nevertheless, I suppose as a press woman, I think it is very, very important for us as press people in this very, very specific time, very critical time for Iraq, that we watch what we say, we monitor what we say, because we don't want to be seen as inciting violence, as indeed being the voice of Saddam Hussein or anybody else like that. So there is a line to be drawn here.
And you're based there in London, watching from afar, if you like. Is there a feeling from your colleagues and indeed yourself that Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya are actually inciting, or are they simply reporting what they see as the news of the day?
Well, you see, again, we come back to this debate. Yeah, we do debate this among our colleagues a lot. And some think that, no, they have crossed the line, that by repeating the messages of Saddam Hussein, they are not simply saying the message, they are not simply reporting, but they are inciting. Other people think, no, this is the freedom of the press, it is our job to report, and if indeed we don't report, then somebody else is going to report. So let us be the ones to do it. There is some sort of a war, if you like, who's going to get the message first. Plus, some people also are saying, if Al Jazeera or Al Arabiya or Al Hayat indeed don't report, there are many, many press outlets and media outlets inside Iraq that are reporting all sorts of things. And if I may say something here, which you have asked me about before, when it comes to the governing council, people will question if they have indeed taken something more severe, like closing the bureau of Al Jazeera and Arabiya. Wouldn't they have to ask Mr. Brimmer? And what would have Mr. Brimmer have to say? If he says, yes, you should close these bureaus, then he would be seen anti-democratic, which indeed is what the American administration is calling for, democracy in the area. And if indeed he says, don't close it, then it means, you know, he is like going against the council, and it means the council have no say. It's a very, very critical debate. It's a very delicate situation, as you can see. So maybe I think the decision today of the council was, they didn't have to go to Mr. Brimmer. They just issued this, and indeed they can do that. And it's not seen as a drastic measure.
All right. Baria Alamuddin, thanks for talking with us.
And without hesitation, let's go back to the UN Security, the UN General Assembly, where Prime Minister of Italy, Silvio Berlusconi.
States, and ladies and gentlemen, the European Union welcomes the Secretary General's recent report on the implementation of the development goals indicated in the United Nations Millennium Declaration and its conclusions. We share his view that the multilateral institutions should be updated and strengthened, and we're ready to contribute actively to the goal of building an international order based on effective multilateral institutions and within the fundamental framework of the UN Charter.
هناك حاجة لدفع العملية السياسية إلى الأمام حتى تكون هناك واقعية لما يجب فعله ضمن نطاق زمني محدد. عملية وضع الدستور الجديد قد تستغرق وقتا، وأن عملية وضع لوائح الانتخابات هي الأخرى قد تستغرق بعض الوقت حتى تؤدي إلى عملية انتخابات. عليه لم ألحظ خلافات عميقة في مجلس الحكم الانتقالي، لكن ربما كانت هناك خلافات لكنني لم ألحظها.
There may well be divisions, but it's not something that I have picked up.
بارونس أيمس، لقد عدت مؤخرا من اجتماعات البنك والنقد الدوليين في دبي، ولابد أنك اجتمعت في العديد من الدول التي ستشترك في اجتماعات الدول المانحة بالنسبة للعراق لإعادة إعمار العراق. فهل تعتقدين أن هذه الدول راغبة فعلا في الاشتراك وتقديم كل العون لإعادة إعمار العراق؟
Well, at the moment, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are engaged.
في الوقت الحاضر أن البنك وصندوق النقد الدوليين منشغلان في تقويم الوضع في العراق، وسيضعان تقريران يشكل الأساس لمحادثات مؤتمر الدول المانحة في تشرين أول أكتوبر المقبل، وإن هذا التقرير لن يكون جاهزا حتى ذلك الوقت. عليه فإننا لا نعلم حتى الآن حجم التمويل المطلوب. بعد التعرف على ما قد يتمكن الجانب العراقي من تقديمه وما هو المطلوب لعملية إعادة إعمار البلاد، عليه لم يكن هناك مباحثات حول المال المطلوب ومقدار التبرعات التي ستقدم. كانت هناك تصريحات عن القلق من أهمية العملية السياسية والحاجة إلى أن يقوم العراقيون أنفسهم بعملية قيادة بلدهم كي يتم التقدم من المرحلة الانتقالية إلى قيام حكومة منتخبة ديمقراطية. وهناك تأييد واسع لأن يوكل دور هام ومحوري للأمم المتحدة، خصوصا فيما يتعلق بالعملية السياسية.
هناك قرارا بشأن العراق أمام مجلس الأمن يدرسه هذه الأيام، فهل تعتقدي أن هذا القرار سيمر؟ وهل تعتقدي أن هذا سيؤثر على عملكم داخل العراق؟
We are very hopeful that we will get a resolution.
كلنا ثقة من أننا سنحصل على قرار من شأنه أن يسهم في زيادة الوضوح في شأن دور الأمم المتحدة في العراق، وهذا ما يتطلع عليه كثير من الدول المانحة وصولا إلى تضافر الجهد الدولي في العراق.
Make a greater international effort, if you like, in Iraq.
يقال أن حكومة عراقية ديمقراطية ستشكل في العام المقبل بعد الانتخابات، فهل هذا يعني خروج القوات التحالف فورا أم أنها باقية؟
سرعان ما يتم تشكيل حكومة جديدة في العراق ستقرر هذه الحكومة فيما إذا كان العراق بحاجة إلى استمرار المجتمع الدولي بتقديم العون له، وذلك في ضوء الوضع الأمني واستدامة برنامج التنمية على المدى البعيد.
Thank you.
من ناحيته دعا